All right, let's get on with the conversation now with Senator Matt Canavan, who's in Canberra, talking about all matters big and serious at the moment. And, of course, tomorrow is when things get even more serious in terms of the voting. Lovely to see you, mate. Happy New Year. Melbourne's Lord Mayor is Nicholas Rees. Happy New Year to him too. And thank you for paying attention to us and not a bunch of people grunting while whacking at a ball. I do appreciate it. I know you got tickets for all sessions all the time as the Mayor. But let's get to this here. Now, Senator, tomorrow, presumably, is when there's going to start to be bill introduced. It'll easily pass the lower house, and then the debate happens in the Senate in and around the response to what took place in Bondi, and specifically the stuff in and around hate speech. We keep hearing some of it's on the table, none of it's on the table. What's your thought, and what can you tell us before we go into a big one tomorrow? Because it's one of the reasons why you've all been called back to Canberra.
Yeah, look, Paul, I mean, the Prime Minister's made an absolute mess of this over the past week. We've seen the bill change multiple times. There's been a new version of the bill that we've seen today that's quite different in places. I mean, really, it's been messier than my car looked after 3 weeks of camping over the holidays. It's a complete shemozzle. We've lost a whole part of the Act, the so-called racial vilification provisions. That's a positive step. That was an extremely draconian situation where people could face 5 years in jail for just things they say that might leave someone intimidated, as the law said. But that's all gone. The Prime Minister's dumped that. I still have some serious concerns, though, particularly around the listing of so-called hate groups, and particularly the way hate crimes are defined in this Act. Crimes can be anything that causes serious harm, that goes to psychological harm, economic harm, or social harm. Really vague, broad terms. And if we're going to give a minister the power to designate an entire organisation as persona non grata and just completely abolish them, you can go to jail if you associate with them. If that power is going to exist in our laws, it's got to be very, very tightly targeted. And this bill doesn't do that at the moment. It gives way too much power to the government. Yeah, now if we're talking about hate speech that potentially leads to violence, Nicholas, haven't we been hearing something for the past 2 years that silence is violence? So if you say something, it could lead to violence. If you don't say anything or you don't call it out, I joke, but still, these are the vagaries here, right? Where in Australia, you want to be able to have free and full expression, but also we don't want to live in the sort of nanny state that's turning around and saying, well, somebody else's feelings, and then they get to determine what you really meant to say, when what you really meant to say was nothing other than potentially a joke.
Yes, I mean, this is the challenge of making legislation, isn't it? You've got to weigh up competing priorities, put in place the right checks and balances, and hopefully get it right. I mean, I've got to say, Matt's given us a bit of a run through of what's going on in the sausage machine making factory, which is federal parliament. It was a bit disappointing to hear him lead off by playing the man and spending all that time attacking Anthony Albanese, when these are really important issues which need our national legislators to really bring, their best game to the table. What I can tell you is I think Australia needs stronger anti-hate laws. I think we need stronger anti-vilification laws. I don't want to see groups like the Nazis and Islamist hate groups preaching hate and spreading fear in our nation, and I really hope our federal parliament can take strong action there. I also want to see less guns on the streets of Australia, and I hope our national legislators will do their job and give Australians what they want.
All right, Matt, I've got a whole list of other stuff, but I've got a feeling this is the fight for the rest of this segment of the show. There are 4 million registered guns in Australia. Again, according to news reports at the time and authorities, there were licensed firearms owners who are alleged to have committed what took place in Bondi. But very obviously, I, like many, have been flamed by legal firearms owners saying, well, hang on, they're going to crack down on me. It's not going to stop one crook who uses any of these things. But we are in a scenario where surely there's an area of compromise here. Australia doesn't need 4 million guns. And I say that as somebody who understands how they need to be used as tools on properties, how some people may want to collect. But what's the case for more than 4 million guns?
We actually have fewer guns per person today than we did at the Port Arthur massacre. The number of guns have increased in the past decade or so, but so has the population. If you have been looking around, our population has gone through the roof, but on a per person basis, there's a lower amount than we had in Port Arthur. And I don't know. You say we don't need 4 million guns. Well, Paul, what is the number? Do we have 2 million or 1 million or 3 million? What's the number that keeps us safe? I don't know if that's actually a useful metric here to decide these things.
Sure.
What we should do is have a system in place where anybody that is of serious risk to the broader community, there's a strong chance they don't end up with a gun licence. And clearly the failings here in this particular instance seem to be there wasn't those checks and balances in place for somebody that had been on an ASIO watch list and then could live with somebody else who was a licensed firearm owner. There wasn't a lot of communication there. So those are the sort of things that could be fixed here instead of this lazy approach where we just take guns off people that have not committed a crime, no risk of committing a crime. I mean, keep in mind the legislation tomorrow doesn't do a lot of what you've just said anyway. It establishes funds for a buyback scheme. It seeks to strengthen some of the importation controls, mostly state controls. I mean, it's cracking down. They're cracking down, apparently going to crack down on the importation of gel blasters. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, is that going to be a serious risk to the safety of Australians? Why is that in there? So this is where the detail's really important. People and governments often use these, unfortunately, and quite distastefully in my view, use tragedies like we've seen to slip in all kinds of things under the guise that we should be doing something when they take away rights from law-abiding Australians.
I agree, but don't forget as well, it was the Labor Party who refused in the Senate to vote for mandatory detention of people importing illegal guns. That's against our principles, but now they want to pretend that this is their way to dealing with safety. Nick, the reverse here, right? It's not devil's advocate, but it's serious, right? Which is, okay, plenty of people in and around your city over summer will have said, well, there shouldn't be a single person who has a single gun anywhere in metropolitan Melbourne. It should only be for the bush. That's the way it is. Okay, but sporting shooting is an Olympic sport. It is one that if somebody wants to do, yet they don't happen to live in the bush, well, then how do we facilitate that? Do we keep all of the guns at the local gun club and turn that into the local armoury, that if dodgy people want to roll over, they roll over? Again, you can't have a scenario where something is an Olympic sport that's been practised in the Melbourne Games, the Sydney Games and the Brisbane Games, but people won't be able to have access to it. Or do you think the point here is that the legislation says none of that matters as long as it's 4 if you're in the city and it's 10 if you're in the bush?
Look, can we start by all agreeing that nothing that's being debated in the federal parliament this week is going to put at risk Australia's chances of claiming gold in the shooting at the Olympics? And I say
just
that
saying, let's stop
Mike
pretending
Diamond, great Victorian, winning
the guns are only for killers.
But look, I mean, I think the killer point here is the one you made, Paul. Like, there's 4.1 million guns in Australia, more than there were at the time of the Port Arthur massacre. And as we all saw so dramatically in Bondi, when there are nut jobs on our streets with long-arm weapons, powerful weapons that they're able to access through existing legal arrangements in Australia, something has gone very wrong and needs to be done. And I think it is really disappointing that the Nationals haven't shown the sort of leadership we saw from the Nationals in these sort of crises in the past and come together with the Liberal Party and other political parties in the Parliament to get the job done that needs to be done. The number one objective of government, remember, is to keep people safe. And as we saw in those terrible events in Bondi, the current laws are not working and we need to have change. And I think, it's not too late for you, Matt. It's not too late for the Nationals. You should get behind these important reforms.
I want to know,
Nick, Nick said nothing in this legislation tomorrow is going to stop us winning gold. Well, just point to me the provisions there in that section, the Gun Law Act, which is going to stop at Bondi. What's going to prevent Bondi that's in the Act tomorrow?
Well, we need tougher rules around who has access to guns.
Specific things.
Background checks that are done on people. As we saw very clearly in Bondi in December, the system failed. And these reforms are sensible. And the Nationals, as you've done in the past, should get behind them.
With all respect, I don't think you've read them, Nick. It's not your job, I know, but there's nothing in there that's going to do that.
Now, I wanted to have a chat about Greenland, but alas, matters domestically have taken over. Thank you, lads. We will talk at Mayor, Senator. We'll talk to you again on Monday nights here, each and every week here on Paul Murray.